Visa, MasterCard, and a number of U.S. banks have agreed to pay an unprecedented $6.2 billion to settle a long-running lawsuit brought by merchants over the fees they pay when they accept payment through a card. You know, this sounds like a big number, Molly.
Yes.
But, you know, the truth is it's not. Because how much did the companies make? They're paying out $6.2 billion for fraud. I mean, that's what we're talking about.
Correct.
They kept it a secret. It's fraud. First of all, explain the case briefly and tell us how much they made doing this.
Sure. Well, you know, what's so interesting to me is that this lawsuit was filed a decade ago. So over a decade ago, in fact, 2005. So they've been going at this for some time. The National Retail Federation is heavily involved now, but they were not involved in the initial lawsuit, which was brought on by thousands of retailers who are saying, hey, you're jacking up our costs with these swipe fees, which is basically the cost of doing business for a bank card. And they said, you know, we can't keep passing these costs on to our customers. It's 2 to 4%. They're not going to buy as much when they're in our stores. We can't give them other options. You're prohibiting us by your policies from giving these customers other options on how to pay for their items. And this is basically cutting into our bottom line because it's hurting our business. And so this has been going back and forth for some time with some attempts towards a settlement. The Supreme Court got involved at one point.
Why did the Supreme Court get involved? How did this? First of all, a settlement was thrown out to begin with by a federal judge, the initial settlement. Tell me about that.
Yes. So basically they did come to a settlement, and at one point that was going to be about $5.7 billion, but 8,000 retailers had dropped out by that point, so it almost took the heart out of the case, and the Supreme Court said, let's table this, and then the National Retail Federation got involved. They appealed it. And that's how it got tabled, basically. They appealed it, then the Supreme Court upheld that appeal, which allowed the case to move forward and basically be heard again. So this is a result of that case being heard again, although the National Retail Federation still isn't extremely happy with it, because this is, like you said, just a small amount compared to the $250 billion in swipe fees that they made over the time period that this lawsuit was filed. So this, you know, $7.25 billion is just a drop in the bucket, and they've made no effort to address the policies that resulted in this enormous amount of
it's continuing. It's continuing. In other words,
quit your complaining.
Yeah, exactly. We got $250 billion. This is the cost of doing business. In other words,
correct.
If you can make $250 billion, will you pay out $6 billion every 20 years? Basically, that's kind of the analysis.
You got it.
Is it a good business decision? And so here we've got it. Here we've got something to where they paid out $6.2 billion, but they are still ripping people off on the swipe. How does the swipe work?
So basically, like you said, it's the cost of doing business. It's the transaction fee when a bank customer says, hey, I want to use my card. That cost is passed on to the retailer. So it's a transaction fee that the retailer passes on to the customer for the convenience of using that card. And because so many people use those cards, retailers know that they can't necessarily quit using them altogether. So they feel like they're prohibited in the options that they can give customers. And they want them to spend more money in their store. And they feel like these rising swipe fees keep those customers from spending more money with them. So as a result, these banks are making just billions and billions of dollars on these fees, and then they're keeping it for themselves and passing it on as rewards, if you will, to customers and various other incentive programs within the banks. But it's basically like, hey, we know it's easy to use these cards. We don't want you to feel like, we're basically a cashless society to a great extent now, so they know that they have these retailers over a barrel.
Molly, thank you for joining me. I don't predict this is ever going to get any better because, you know, banks and corporations right now control the politics of American democracy.
We need to trade, Pat. We need to go back to trading.
Exactly.